Ok, parfait.
Okay, here we are, the penultimate Italia.ie podcast. I'm trying to get excited about this one, lads. It's always hard to get excited for a third place playoff. Do you feel they should be quashed? Do you feel they have any right to be in the tournament, or should everyone just go home after?
I love the third place playoff. I think it's great. It's unique. It is absolutely pointless in the sense that both teams get bronze medals anyway. But I suppose there is a prestige to finishing third. But I just like having that little pause before the final, because everything's been so intense and so do or die. And I like
they
that.
They are usually a bit damp, though, aren't they? Like for instance, the England and Belgium.
They already played in the group stages as well.
And didn't they basically forfeit the first game as well because they were both through anyway?
They did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The one I liked was, remember, Uruguay and Germany in, what was it, 2010? I think 2010.
Oh, yeah,
that was a good one, but I think that was just because Uruguay and Germany were really up for it. But generally, teams don't seem to be.
I know in 2006 it was kind of an opportunity for Germany to kind of sign off with their fans as well. So it was really nice.
I think Turlock's onto something there, though. It shouldn't be just 2 bronze medals. It should be like, you know what I mean? There should be an award, and then maybe, I wouldn't say a punishment. I was going to say a punishment, but finishing fourth in the World Cup doesn't deserve a punishment.
You should get a spot in the Europa League.
Yeah, well, on that then, can we at least all agree that the third place playoff in what's the new competition again? The new
Nations League.
Yeah, can we at least agree that that's pointless?
Well, it's kind of, I suppose, because isn't there only 4 teams in the final tournament? I suppose it's a bit of a.
I think you're already there. You're all in one venue, aren't you? So you might as well play.
There used to be a third place game in the FA Cup, which was completely pointless. But anyway, we strayed a long way from Barry for this game. But just to say that there is something on this game in the sense that obviously Linekar and Shillaci are both somewhat in the hunt for the Golden Boot. So that's something to watch.
It's also interesting that Italy seem to make a few changes, but the one player who doesn't get it back into the team is Carnevale, who's not even on the bench. Whereas Carlo Ancelotti, who we'll later revere as a managerial mind, does come into the team.
Yeah, in fairness, Ancelotti's been carrying a knock. Carnevale just clearly wasn't up to it in the first couple of games, and he's very pissed off about not being included in the 16, because he correctly, as it turns out, says that he doesn't feel he'll get another chance with the national team, so he would have liked to have signed off. Vialli is left out of the 16 as well, which is interpreted as a bit of a snub. And Vialli, I don't know if his view on this has changed in subsequent years, but in the run-up to this game, he talks about how the World Cup may have been a great experience for everyone else, but it's been a very disappointing one for him.
The thing is, in this game, as we covered Italy's striking options, they couldn't have even if they changed all their players and didn't play all of the strikers who'd already had a game, they probably still couldn't fit everybody in. Was Mancini in there as well?
Mm-hmm. Mancini was
ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
For such a classy player, it's interesting. We've spoken an awful lot about the Ireland's kind of attacking options and the fact that Mick Byrne and Frank Stapleton didn't get anywhere near the team, but Italy had a plethora of forward options, and I think that's probably why we were so surprised that Carnevale started the tournament as first choice. But then again, I suppose with Shillaci and Baggio coming back into the team, England needed to even though they made a few changes of their own, you can see that our friend Mark Wright still keeps his place in the team, still vital to Bobby Robson's defensive effort right till the end.
It's interesting that Stuart Pearce and Chris Waddle are dropped for this game, because it's said explicitly in the papers that that's to kind of, I suppose, protect them mentally after the trauma of missing those penalties, which kind of surprised me a bit. Football wasn't all that enlightened about these things, back 30 years ago, but it was certainly felt that the hangover from the trauma of that semi-final was too much to expose them to another game in such short order.
I wouldn't have thought Stuart Pearce at the least would be kind of the sort of person who would need a game off to recover. He'd be the sort of person who goes out there and gets back on the horse.
Yeah, but you mentioned hangover there. Am I wrong in thinking that there might be a sense that there's maybe a more literal hangover that they could be dealing with after?
No, Brian Robson was gone at this point.
Well, yeah, there are a few changes for England. Tony Dorigo, actually, speaking to Stuart Pearce, comes in at left back for, again...
Tiny Dorigo.
Exactly, yeah. A player who was kind of torn in many different directions internationally, but was, I think, given his Italian roots, I'd heard him talk about how much this playoff meant to him, actually, to get on the pitch in the World Cup in Italy. So, yeah, if no one else, it certainly meant something to him.
Gary Stevens back in the team for the first time since the opening game as well.
Yeah, Gary Stevens comes in, Trevor Steven comes in, and the much maligned Steve McMahon comes in central midfield.
Is that a dig at me?
No, it's an acknowledgement of reality, I think.
Another dig at Steve McMahon.
But yeah, we have to talk about the kind of world-class shithousery of Peter Shilton, who the plan was, some people say the plan was to give Chris Woods a game in this match. That was Bobby Robson's idea, or even to give Chris Woods and Dave Besant a half each to let them experience the World Cup. And Robson came to his captain, Peter Shilton, with that idea, and Peter Shilton told him to get fucked. He was playing, which he had absolutely nothing to play for at this point. He was already, after one of the earlier games, he'd already become the world's most capped footballer. But yeah, he wasn't showing the kind of doggedness that would characterise his political opinions in later years. He wasn't for budging.
In Dave Besant's case, at least, I'm guessing he was probably still by the pool and wasn't aware that they were still in the World Cup. Italy did still go with Walter Zenga, so they didn't give a game to Tacconi.
Yeah, quite a good thing as well. Speaking of goalkeepers with very exotic and dodgy political leanings, Tacconi is one of them, as we discovered in subsequent years. Yeah, what are the odds of two of them being involved in the same World Cup playoff?
I suppose when you have Gascoigne and Baggio on the team, maybe they were just jealous of right wingers.
Yeah, Viercavod comes into the Italian team as well. So yeah, I think this game probably meant a bit more to Italy than it did to England, and obviously Shillaci wanted to really cement that role as the star of the World Cup in many ways by securing the Golden Boot. The game itself.
Sorry, just before you get into it, is there anything in Barry as a venue? Because I know it was used for an Ireland World Cup qualifier in 2009 as well, but like it wouldn't strike me as the most I don't know, glamorous or maybe most even most illustrious of Italian venues. So
it's a very
is there
interesting
anything
story. Yeah, Bari was, let's just say, particularly well politically connected at this time. A lot of the kind of political class in Bari, and I think the ecclesiastical class, if you can put it that way as well, some of the senior Catholic clerics in the city were very well connected politically. And that's one of the reasons that it profited so much out of this World Cup. And yeah, there's questions as to how some of the money that was allocated to the city and the stadium was ultimately spent. But I think we can safely say that that's at least part of the reason that this relatively prestigious game, Italy's last appearance in the tournament, as it turned out, was played at that fairly unglamorous venue.
Is there a bit of a geographical balancing going on as well, considering, Napoli is probably the only other major city in the south that is hosting games?
Possibly, yeah.
Can I just say, if you do want a little bit more on that, I'm sure you can find one of the many times Gab Marcotti has gone off on one about these individuals who are well connected on various, I don't know, podcasts or otherwise, and you can hear a sort of an unvarnished attack on some of the scandals led to these. Is it the owner, his brothers, or something to that effect? Does it's related through the owners of Barry or something to that effect? There's a bishop, there's a politician, that there's something else, and it's a lovely link up as to how Barry get this outrageously done up stadium for a team in Serie B.
Yeah, and well, the game it plays host to it's not the best game of the World Cup. It's not the most meaningful game of the World Cup, but this is probably the funniest game of the World Cup. The first half is kind of a non-event. Shillaci has a decent chance to get that kind of much coveted sixth goal after Ciro Ferrara has a shot off the post after 20 minutes. Shilton's nowhere near it. But it really kind of comes to life in the last 20 minutes when, just after Nicola Berti has been brought on for Italy, and Steve McMahon, the kind of established master of disaster, is at the centre of this, although it's not his fault. He plays a really simple back pass to Peter Shilton. Peter Shilton then relinquishes the ball, apparently not realising that Roberto Baggio is right behind him. Baggio creeps up on him and kind of gets a touch on it. I think Shilton brings him down. This should be a penalty before anything else. But it falls to Shillaci. Shillaci nutmegs Des Walker and then plays a very unselfish, given that he was a few yards from goal and looking for that sixth goal. He plays a nice little inside of the boot pass to Baggio. Baggio dribbles it across the goal line. Paul Parker, you really need to watch this goal to see Paul Parker's role in it. He ends up on his arse and kind of chasing Baggio across the goal line, almost like you kind of play with a puppy on his hands and knees. But Baggio manages to evade him anyway, and finishes nicely to the roof of the net from a few yards out with quite a few players on the line.
Am I wrong in saying that Baggio was offside from that pass from Shillaci?
I think arguably, yeah, because the goalkeeper was out, but there might have been he was maybe level with the two defenders.
Can I just make the point that, is this what Peter Shilton's up to? Is he taking the piss to this extent where he's like, he's just showing the sub keepers, I'll pick myself and I'll fucking throw one in as well, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm here for the next 10, 15.
To
be fair, his competitor is Dave Besant, who broke his foot by dropping a jar of salad cream on it.
You're saying Woods as well. Like, he's literally like, don't care, I'm just going to take the piss out of this game. He still won't get in here.
Well, anyway, England kind of go for broke at that point. Mark Wright and the unfortunate Steve McMahon get hooked immediately. And in their place are sent on Chris Waddle and Neil Webb for his first taste of World Cup action. A lot of people, I would imagine, forgot he was in the squad, but he gets on for the last 20 minutes. And with 9 minutes to go, England equalise. Now, we had a discussion much earlier in the tournament about whether a headed goal could be a contender for goal of the tournament. If there is one at this World Cup, it's probably this from David Platt. It's a lovely cross from the left from Tony Dorigo, and Platt gets up good, 16 yards out, and absolutely, I mean, he always had a kind of forehead like a mallet, but he absolutely connects with incredible force with this one from a long way out, and flies past Senga with the power of regular shots struck with the foot from a kind of equivalent distance.
Still Shillaci against Austria for me.
Yeah, for the build-up, but yeah, for the headed finish, I think this is an incredible goal by David Platt, and his third of the competition. Again, not a very heralded player coming into the tournament. Unbelievably, the rules call for extra time at this point. But fortunately, that's averted when Shillaci is played in through the middle. Paul Parker falls over. Rather, he's penalised for tripping Shillaci, but actually he kind of falls backwards, and Shillaci falls over him while trying to stay on his feet. I've never seen a player be so, when a player, particularly an Italian player in the box, be so pissed off about winning a penalty, because I think he really felt he was in for a tap in. But yeah, Shillaci, obviously this is the moment that everyone's been waiting for. This is potentially the sixth goal that secures the golden boot for him.
Liam Brady's eyes peeled.
It bears a certain resemblance to that title-winning penalty by Liam Brady all those years earlier. He steps up, rolls it kind of into the right-hand side of the goal, not dead central, but I want people to watch this penalty back, because Shilton only starts to dive after he's seen the ball going in the opposite direction to the direction he dives in. If you've ever seen football kind of recreated in a movie or a TV show where there's a predetermined outcome, it's almost like, Peter Shilton is acting in one of those, because he seems to know that Shillaci is destined to score. And he doesn't even make a token effort to go in the right direction when he's clearly telegraphed which way he's putting it, to the extent of actually hitting the ball. He's no chance of saving it, but the ball is already past him by the time he decides to dive in the wrong directions.
We talked about the English Game, the Netflix series earlier, and it's very much the same thing. I think I wrote a review of it in Extra Time, and I put in some sort of line that there's no shot that the Darwin keeper can't jump out of the way of, because it's just it's so unrealistic the way it is. But in that particular case, I think Shilton was actually moving to one side. I just think that he probably couldn't change directions because he's an old man at this point.
I bet you he's staring the sub keepers. His eye contact hasn't broken. He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna fall forward.
Chris.
Yeah, not even looking at Chris Wood, just falls over to the side. Look what I'm doing, Chris. You're not getting down.
Dave Besant making a salad cream sandwich on the side.
That's the only plausible explanation I've heard for that passage of play. And an even more implausible one comes up in stoppage time, when the ball is a wide ball is played in from the right to Nicola Berti. Now, at this point, Berti, as the ball is played, has 4 defenders and the goalkeeper between him and the goal. He runs in on the kind of blind side of the English defence, loops a header around Peter Shilton, who, again, looks as though he's literally tethered to the goal line, and gets kind of he can't even fall over properly in the right direction. The ball goes into the net, and then, astonishingly, the goal is ruled out for the most baffling offside flag I think I have ever seen.
It's probably the worst decision I've ever seen in any context. You sent it to us earlier on today, and after watching it a few times, it just becomes so painfully obvious that, like, maybe this guy is the sub goalkeeper of linesman. Do you know what I mean? Like, who's along for the ride. He never thought he was going to even become a linesman, and then they're like, "In you go for the third place playoff."
But even so, this is the competition of sub keepers stepping up. Whether it's Cameroon or Argentina, where were the linesmen in this? But I think Turlock was saying earlier that there was a freeze frame of that moment, and there's 4 players between Bertie and the actual the offside line. But I know the offside rules were a little bit different back then, but I don't think they were that different.
Look, you've tweeted it out anyway, so people do just want to, if people are listening to this and don't quite understand how unbelievably bad it was, they can go and check your Twitter.
To be fair, I think in general in the tournament, the referees, or the linesmen, seem to be particularly kind of cautious about offsides. There was definitely 2 or 3 occasions in the Ireland-Italy game where Ireland very much got the benefit of the doubt when it looked like Italy players were onside.
Yeah, I think so. John Aldridge had a borderline one against the Netherlands as well. But yeah, that's fortunately, I think, for the Algerian linesman, that's the last action of the match. I don't think there's any ceremony to be done afterwards, because I think that the medals have already been awarded before the game.
Was that kind of the end of when teams would just be coupled together by whoever was ready? Kind of French ref, Algerian linesman, Swiss linesman. Like they started kind of working with teams after that, didn't they?
They did, and there would generally tended to be some logic in terms of all the officials sharing, if not a language, then at least a kind of lingua franca that they all spoke. But yeah, I don't know anything about this Algerian linesman. It may well have been a blot in an otherwise impeccable career. But yeah, that's the end of it. Italy finished 3rd. England finished 4th. I think, in a way, creditable achievements based on pre-tournament expectations, but the Italians...
And tournament performances, I think you'd say as well.
Well, yeah, although the Italians had managed to, win all bar one of their games. So I think on form, the Italians, or based on the kind of fever pitch that Italy had reached, I think the Italians finished their tournament in much more downbeat mood than the English, who are still smarting a bit after the semi, but very proud. I think
we've had a chance to look over the whole tournament. I don't know if you lads would agree, but I wouldn't I wouldn't have said that Italy and England were the third and fourth best teams in the tournament.
I don't know. I think I would possibly have Cameroon before one of them, but I think they were up
I'd
there.
have Cameroon ahead of England.
Yugoslavia,
anyway.
maybe.
Yugoslavia, definitely. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I think Cameroon, just for, I mean, we kind of touched on it in the Germany game, how unorthodox they were and how little people knew about them and how to stop them, maybe more so than these teams who had played each other relatively recently. I mean, Cameroon are obviously the team to take away from this tournament, but I think it's a bit harsh, kind of. I mean, tournaments are down to these fine margins, and at the end of the day, each of these teams has gotten there. I look back at both of these teams and think, as you said, we've listed through the Italian strikers and the unbelievable quality they have right throughout the team, and you go through that English team, and this is probably a team that English teams since have aspired to and not been able to reach. So I think I think it's probably fair enough.
I don't know, just kind of going on, the group stages when England were very much, against Ireland. They probably still should have won the game, but they were very underwhelming, and they had to basically change their entire system and sort of, sit in and get a lucky draw. Well, maybe not lucky, but certainly earn a draw against a fairly mundane Dutch side. So I don't think they really impressed at any point in the tournament.
I don't know. I think that's harsh. I think at the end of the day, you look at people often say you grow into it in the group stage a bit. Some teams do that, and I think England probably did that. And I suppose the Belgium game is one where they really came to the fore. They switched things up when they were struggling against Cameroon, and only for a few bad penalties. I mean, they started off relatively well against Germany, and if it could have really gone kind of the other way, and we'd be looking at. Maybe we'd be downplaying how good they were if they'd have gone all the way to the final.
You can disagree with me, but I think they were outplayed by Belgium. I know they won the game. They were outplayed by Cameroon. Again, I know they won the game. I think the only two teams that they can say that they outplayed were Ireland and Egypt.
Saying that though, Dave, I mean, Argentina are in the final, and we could definitely make a case for them not being in the top 5 or 6 teams of this tournament. So yeah,
you've gone one step further now.
We know Bobby Robson is gone after this and ends up being replaced by Graham Taylor, and I suppose all of that is for another day. But let's talk about Italy's legacy after this point. The hosts gone out. They've got third place. Vicini, I don't know why in my head he was gone after this, but he's not, is he? He sticks around another campaign.
He hangs on until 91, yeah.
And just on Bobby Robson, I actually only realised this because of a question on the Chase. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire the other day. That he's the longest serving England manager for a long time. He actually had 8 years, which I don't remember. I thought it was Sven-Göran Eriksson was the answer, but it was actually Bobby Robson.
You say Vicini's gone in 91 then, so obviously he struggles. He doesn't get them there in 92. I mean, could they have seen that coming in any capacity? Considering, I mean, I would argue that he's bungled a lot through this tournament.
Well, I think what we can see from this tournament is that they have a very talented team with some very talented strikers, and there is an argument they weren't using the best of their capabilities. But I always thought that Vicini was never, considering that they did replace him with Sacchi 2 years later. The European Cup winning manager with AC Milan. They'd go on to have Trapattoni and Lippi and all these hugely celebrated European managers. Vicini seems to be kind of an underwhelming choice, and somebody who didn't, despite the fact that he came third in the World Cup, he doesn't seem to have maybe got the maximum out of this team.
Kind of the Brian Kerr of Italy. All his success really had been with Italian underage national teams. So I suppose he was seen as someone who had a grasp of tournament football. Maybe that was his appeal. But he was already senior enough by 1990.
What's the Italian version of he's gone and snotted himself?
Before we move on then for the final tomorrow, what's the legacy of this World Cup for Italy? Because as you said, it's this
Pavarotti, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, probably, because this isn't Baggio's World Cup, and this isn't Vicini is not remembered much for it. Is it purely Shillaci?
I don't think so.
It has to be just for the fact that from where he came from, 1 year at Juventus, and all of a sudden he's the top striker in the world, at least for 6 weeks. He doesn't sustain those heights, and it's just it's a singular story, I think.
Shillaci will only ever get one additional goal for the national team. He scored 7 goals for the national team, and 6 of them were at the World Cup. But yeah, that said, I mean, if this team were just looked back on as kind of really disappointing, underachieving losers, then I don't think Shillaci's cameo would would be remembered as fondly as it is. I think this is as I said over the years, I think the intensity of feeling, the fact that it happened in Italy, that there were so many close games, that it ended so, in a footballing sense, tragically, is rather operatic and rather in keeping with the Italian psyche and the Italian aesthetic. So I think it is remembered as a particularly meaningful World Cup in Italy. The financial legacy of the World Cup is a different matter entirely.
Well, there you go.
I just think it's interesting that, with so many people maybe in that squad underperforming, like Vialli, the setup against Austria aside, Carnevale obviously didn't do much. Baggio was kind of in and out. He had a couple of decent games, maybe against Ireland included, but with the attacking talent in the squad really not particularly stepping up, Giannini maybe accepted. The fact that Shillaci was able to come from nowhere and really take that mantle and take it upon himself, I think it's quite a remarkable story.
It is, and he's actually, the more I've watched back this tournament, it's kind of incredible that he wasn't just, I know Napoleon said he'd rather have a lucky general than a good one, but he wasn't just a lucky one. He was, for these 4 weeks, he was the best striker in the world on every conceivable metric. He was everywhere. Technically he was outstanding, which was something he didn't have a particular reputation for. He was excellent in link-up play. He was incredibly sharp, and he looked like someone who, he didn't look like a flash in the pan at this stage. He looked like someone who was going to stay at that level, barring injury and so forth, for a very long time. So, yeah, it's just extraordinary that World Cups can kind of capture lightning in a bottle like that.
Is there a parallel with that? The only one I can that comes to mind at the moment is maybe Asamoah Gyan in 2010, where he just looked like a complete world beater, and he kind of had a bit of a time after that, but sort of faded away.
In Italy, they say Paolo Rossi, but I think he was always a higher profile player. I mean, there was...
Rossi was only low profile because he was banned for 2 years.
Yeah, but there was obviously the kind of recurrent case of Miroslav Klose, who kind of just only came out of hibernation for World Cups, basically.
Well, we better wrap this one up then. It's gotten on to nearly half an hour. Let's tell you, tomorrow we've got the last ever podcast. We're going to do this, the Italia 90 final, West Germany versus Argentina.
Smithwicks. Questa birra è molto buona.
Italians?
Yes. I'm Giovanni, and this is my friend, Giorgio.
I'm Ray Houghton, and this is my friend, Dave O'Leary.
Sorry, I forget to introduce my other friend, Toto Shillaci.
Chi sono questi?
Good call.
Thank you very much.
Smithwicks. Are you going for a pint?